All right, let's talk circular saws. Circular saws are so named because their saw blades are a circle. These are great for doing straight cuts for your basic skills. So if you have a long piece that you need to cut down to be a smaller size, circular saw is going to be your best bet. A couple of the features right off the bat. There's a handle that you can grab on. There's a handle back here next to the trigger where you're going to put your finger and squeeze when you are ready to cut. There's a guard around the blade that automatically slides back as you cut through the material, which is pretty handy. It keeps you safe just about all the time, so you don't need to mess with that. That'll automatically retract as you cut and swing back when you're done cutting. Before you get going, just put an eyeball on it. Make sure that the blade looks about 90 degrees to the plate on the bottom. You won't have to do any fine-tuning adjustments, but if you do see it is out of whack, find a teacher and we can get it set back up for you, or find someone who's able to get it set for you. The only other thing I do want you to check every time is to make sure that our blade depth is set appropriately. So if you check out on the bottom, if you move that blade guard out of the way, you see that blade is set up all the way to its maximum depth right now. That is way deeper than we need for the piece of plywood that I'm going to cut right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the lever on the back that's right next to the handle. Should be pretty tight, so just give it a little extra oomph, it'll be good to go. And now that plate will move to whatever depth you need it to for the saw. So what I'm going to have you do is line up the saw on the side of your material after that lever is loosened, and then lift up the blade, the rest of the saw itself, and you can move that guard out of the way until that blade is just below the thickness of your material. And that way it'll be thick enough or deep enough to cut through without being way too deep and potentially unsafe. Lock that saw back into place and you'll be good to go. All right. As you go to cut, you'll see that there's a little line on here that says 0 next to it. That is the line we're going to line up next to our guide that we put on. I have drawn a line where I want to cut on this piece. So you're going to set up your saw so that that 0 line is lined up with your cut line, and then you'll be good to go. Remember, we always start our saws just off the piece of wood so that we don't get the blade stuck in there as we go. And as you cut through, try and keep the plate as flat to the piece of wood that you're cutting as possible. If you cut it at an angle, it will probably work, but it won't be as safe and won't be as sturdy. You won't have as much control over it as if you keep that whole bottom plate nice and flat and flush to the piece of your wood. All right, I've got my blade depth set. I've got my cut line drawn. We never ever adjust anything on the tool while the tool is plugged in. So now I've plugged in the saw and we are ready to go. I'm going to keep the cable behind me. The cord for the saw needs to go behind me. This goes under the R in room. We need to be mindful of where stuff in the room is. So I'm going to try and get that cord all the way behind me before I line up on my 0 line and cut through this piece of wood. The blade is backed off the wood just a little bit. I'll hit the trigger to get it spun up and then cut through the material. You can see I cut all the way through. Didn't try to end the cut before the cut was done. And there we go, got a nice clean cut right there. So that about does it for circular saws. Just to wrap up, you have handles to hold it securely and control it with precision. Make sure that your blade is 90 degrees to the plate on the bottom. If it's not, ask for help adjusting it. Always set your blade depth to be just beyond the thickness of the material that you're cutting, and wait until all this is set up before plugging it in. When you're good to go, put the tool on the piece of wood, back a little bit from the wood that you're going to be cutting, pull the trigger to get it spun up, cut all the way through, and then you're done. Good luck.